They can directly ruin your life. Once upon a time, a bunch of rich people sat in a room. One of them said, damn, I hate paying taxes. Another one said, bro, me too. They said, you know what we need to do, right? We need to hire somebody to convince poor people to pay more taxes while we pay less taxes. They said, that'll never work. Someone said, wait a second, I might know a guy. Because you see, at this time, Ronald Reagan was a General Electric spokesperson. He was really good at convincing poor people to do whatever the rich company General Electric wanted.
Hey man, Slick Willie did a lot to help that along. Credit where credit is due. I know. But everyone that comes after Reagan, Democrat or Republican, is still following through on the attitude change. If you're thinking about like Nixon, if you're thinking about people that came before, sure, they played a role in this as well. But Ronald Reagan was the point of no return. Like Bill Clinton's, sure, I'm sure he was like super invested in that personally. He's a piece of shit. But like, Bill Clinton was responding to what he perceived as the public pressure to Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Reagan did put up LeBron numbers. Ronald Reagan actually did have that popular mandate, okay, unlike Donald Trump.
But before that, he was a Democrat, an activist, very anti-racism, all for workers' rights. They said, hey, bro, we need to hire you for the opposite side. He said, you think I'm a... They said, here's a bag. He said, when do I start? You see, he took this job because his acting career was failing. So he said, hey, I'm pretty good at this. So he ran for governor of California. He won.
He was also the head of SAG-AFTRA, or SAG at the time. And as the head of SAG, he literally fucking ratted out communists in his own union. He was a snitch. Even when he was the leader of a prominent union in the country, he used his position, rat out rank and file members with what he perceived as having radical politics.
Remember, his only jobs at this point were acting and convincing poor people to do what rich people want. And rich people loved him. He was the perfect storm. They called him the great communicator. One of his exact words were, send those welfare bums back to work. They said, Reagan! He said, but you like how I said that? No, they said, he could do no wrong. So it's only natural he becomes president of the United States. He says, okay, as my first act, I'm going to take the rich people's taxes from 70%. Yeah, fun fact, people like Elon Musk paid 70% in taxes. He said, I'm going to take it from 70% to about 28%. Everybody said, whoa, that sounds kind of low. He said, no, listen, y'all not hearing me though. He said, here's the plan. They're going to be super rich, and then they're going to want to spend more money on their companies, so then they're going to hire people like you. But people back then weren't dumb. They were like, what? He's like, but we're going to also stop those welfare black people from taking your money too, even though white people took most of the welfare money. They're like, well, I don't like black people that much. Okay, you're keep going. So he steps up the charm. He goes, y'all know me. Just see what happens when I deregulate businesses and let them do what they want. It's going to benefit you in the long run. Well, he lied, but listen closely. They were in a recession at the time. But what economists know is that after a recession, usually is a time of mini prosperity, then back to recession. It cycles. So he knew that the economy was going to go back up because that's the natural cycle. So when the economy starts going back up, he's like, see, I told you. They were like, well, he was right. But in the long run, this happens. Basically, as the economy goes up, everybody starts getting paid more. But from when he became...
Dude, look at that. Every graph is like this, bro. No, it's not a natural cycle. I mean, it's somewhat of a natural cycle, basically, under capitalism. It doesn't have to be.
President, everybody started getting paid the same while the economy went way up. What does that mean? Well, the money had to go somewhere, right? And it all went to the rich people. Yeah, right.
Like, isn't that nuts? Like, how do you look at this more equitable system and then turn around and go, this is so much better? That's what's so annoying about people nowadays when they talk about, like, the good old days. What do you mean? Let's get back to the good old days. Like, the dumbest guy you know is advocating for the good old days, thinking that it was that way because, like, black people were segregated or some shit. But the real reason why was because they had better redistributive policies. Like, it wasn't socialist by any means, but at least there was more equitable outcomes for everybody. When they talk about the good old days, they're talking about, like, having decent wages, being able to have one earner in the family and have, like, 2 kids or 3 kids, or even a second family on the side as a secret. Think about how much purchasing power the average American had, that they literally could have a second home for a second secret wife on the side, bro. That shit's unheard of. What are we talking about? Think about that. Nowadays, what's unheard of is living in a one-bedroom apartment by the time you're like 36, 37. That's unheard of. I'm not even talking about owning a home. I'm talking about not having roommates. So when those people, boomers and the lead generation, turn around and say, oh man, we got to go back to the good old days, Republicans turn around and say, yeah, that's right. You mean black people, right? Like, you know, no more Mexicans, right? That's what you mean. It's like, and they go, yeah, that's what I mean. That's why things were good, I think. And the cycle continues. Now, of course, boomers and the lead paint generation are obviously better off overall than the generations that come after them. So for them, for their position, it's like they don't have a lot of life to live, so it doesn't really matter all that much, but they have like most of the wealth captured, or a more equitable distribution of wealth in their generation as opposed to like millennials and Zoomers alike. But that is the design. That is the design that we have currently. The truth you're saying is making me sick.
To the rich people. Yeah, right up until 1980, laws were protecting you a lot more than you think. After hundreds of years of Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt battling, making sure workers have rights, he in one swoop demolishes it and flips it 180. And he was the only person skilled enough to convince poor people that they need to pay more money while rich people pay less. They need to not have workers' rights, and rich people can control their rights. And to this day, Reagan's policies still stick. In fact, Donald Trump just copied Ronald Reagan. Yeah, make America great again. That was Ronald Reagan's campaign slogan.
Yep.
He just took it.
It's true. Also, offloading the de facto slave economy, the global south did real well for obfuscating how much working class wages were getting fucked, NAFTA, etc. Oh, that too, for sure. How do you reconcile this with the fact that real wages have slightly gone up and not down since the 70s? Brother or sister or themperor, real wages going slightly up is nothing in comparison to the overall economy's explosive growth in that same time period, because that is this exact same distribution of wealth that we are looking at right now. It's wealth consolidation, especially when you factor in how expensive things are. You're talking about, oh, well, real wage growth happened since the 70s, albeit slightly. Well, what about big ticket items that you need? Compare wage growth from the 70s to now, like what your wages look like now, and then compare college education. The price of college education in the 70s to right now. Wages are stagnant since then. Output has skyrocketed due to unimaginable technological achievements. Productivity has skyrocketed. American laborers are insanely productive, like incomprehensibly productive in comparison to how productive they were in the 70s because of automation and all of the wonderful technological achievements that make it so that you can basically work 11 people's jobs as one person now. Not even 11, 100 people's jobs. I mean, think about computers even. You're talking about a time when like computers didn't exist versus a time where computers do exist. And not only a time where computers do exist, but they exist on your hand, in your phone, okay? And they're on you all the time, 24/7. The amount of productivity that each laborer has now is unimaginable, incomprehensible to someone who's living in the 70s. Now, adjust that to the price of everything else. You could buy a house for like 50 grand in the 70s. There is no home, no single family home you could purchase for like 50 grand, okay? That does not exist. You can't even buy a lot for that price. The only thing that has gotten cheaper as we offshored slave labor to the third world is commodities, cheap consumer goods, things like a television. That's it. The only thing that has actually become incredibly affordable in the time frame is junk that you throw out every 2 years. No, and also it's designed that way too. That's another problem, which is creating tremendous amounts of landfills all over the goddamn planet. But that's it. You can get a TV for cheaper. This is true. You can get a toaster for much cheaper. Now you can purchase shit much cheaper than you ever could. And that makes people feel like the situation is better overall. But all of the things that you need for survival, healthcare, a house, college education for upward social mobility, have exploded in prices. Yeah, you used to get paid $25K and houses were $50K. Now you get paid $75K and houses are $500K on the cheap side. So yeah, your real wages went up, but everything is so much more expensive. Even in the 90s, the houses were tremendously cheaper in 1998 in Denver, Colorado. The average house price was $149,000. Now it's $649,000. Bro, you can just go buy a 100-inch TV, 100-screen TV for $500 now. That's all that's gotten cheaper. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's the only thing that's cheaper in comparison to how affordable it was back in like the 70s and the 80s. 10 years ago, rent was $700 and TVs were $1,800. Now rent is $1,800 and TVs are $700. Well, that's not 10 years ago. Where is rent $1,800? You know what I mean? This boy is in Oklahoma. He's over here like, dude, what are you talking? Oklahoma City rent is so costly, man. $1,800. My parents' first flat screen was $1,100, and that was after a discount because it had been dropped. They were stoked and thought it was a steal law. I can have a nice TV in my tent. Yeah, that's what it is, though. That's where we're at. It's like, maybe I'm crazy. I think it's much better if people have houses than a new TV every 2 years. The thing is, these are not even like mutually exclusive concepts. You can have a cheap TV and cheap housing, like if you want. Even if that was the trade-off, I would much rather have the cheap housing than the cheap television. Chart of the day or century, July 23rd, 2022. Price changes, January 20th to June 2022. Select the U.S. consumer goods and services and wages. Yeah, since the 2000s, if you look at new cars that have been like relatively inexpensive in comparison year over year, household furnishings, clothing, basically everything that comes from China, okay? Everything that the Chinese hands have built. And I mean China as like a catch-all term for the entire global south. TV prices, look at that. Ooh, so cheap, so good. What's that up there? Hospital services, college tuition, college textbooks, medical care services, childcare and nursery school. Average hourly wages have gone up because this is the American Enterprise Institute that's like pointing all this. Food and beverages and housing. The reason why they're using this chart of the day or century is to say the reason why these things are so costly is because of unions. They're claiming that this is all too costly because of average hourly wages going up. And average hourly wages are going up because of socialism. That's the reason why they're using this graph. Sidebar, why socialism fails. Yeah, this is socialism. That's why it's failing. My neighbor's big brother in 2007 could afford to live in a single bedroom working at a grocery store as a cashier. Now that seems insane. Things have deteriorated a lot just in the last few decades. Yes, and it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. Trump is literally not addressing any of this shit, and he's making it worse. He's looking at a fucking fire, and the only thing he's got is a canister of gasoline and more matches, okay? He walked up to the house that's on fire, and he said, time to dump this gasoline and light it on fire even further. That's what he's doing. He's like, I'm going to fix this.